Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. Thanks for joining. So today we're going to have a very special guest, Phil Penman, who we shall introduce shortly. So Phil's going to take us through his Capture One workflow, which is very interesting as it's totally different to mine. So you actually get to see some variety as opposed to my same old boring workflow that you're used to. Before we get to that, just a couple of housekeeping things. We're streaming out to our webinar room, and we're also going out to YouTube and Facebook as well, live as well. So hello to everybody on the various different channels. For those of you on Facebook and YouTube, we are looking at your comments too, so feel free to put a comment in so we can answer it. If you're in the webinar room itself, then you'll notice to my other side, to my left, you'll see the chat area and the Q&A area. If you keep your questions to the Q&A area, then that will just help to divide it up from the chat itself, because it's very busy today. So to be able to try and filter out the questions, it's good if you could keep them to the Q&A tab, and then we can keep an eye on that. So Andre's helping me out in the webinar room, and my good colleagues are also helping out on YouTube and Facebook. So let's see if we can find Phil. Hi Phil, how's it going?
Morning. How you doing? Or evening?
Morning, afternoon, exactly. So thanks for joining us today, Phil. And you're over in New York, if memory serves me correct.
Yep, just right off 42nd Street in Hell's Kitchen, New York City.
Very nice.
Right.
So to give some background to this webinar, you've been a Capture One user for just under a year, I think.
Yeah,
we discussed.
yeah.
Okay, and as I said in the intro, your workflow is quite different to mine, which is great because it gives people some variety as well. So what we're going to go through today, which me and Phil had a little run through earlier this week, is to kind of take a look at your culling process, if you like, a little bit about the shooting process, and obviously run through some edits as well, and take some questions, of course, from the various different channels. So that's our plan for today. So I'm going to bring up your screen, Phil. Let's just find the right scene. There we go. So we're looking at your screen now, your kind of plethora of photographs. And what I learned from you already is that when you shoot, it's quite a, I guess, prolific number of shots that you can go through on a session.
Sporadic machine gun shooting.
Machine gun shooting, exactly. Yeah.
I get. Yeah, it's kind of this is stuff from yesterday morning. I went out. Basically, I was testing out a new lens. So what I tend to do, I might come back with 200 images from yesterday, varying different kind of shots from around the neighborhood. I'm looking for, I don't know, things that kind of more urban, historic, maybe. Like this is something that was interesting to me, like an old tire store, which is kind of like a holdout. There's a huge Hudson Yard project, and this is kind of like the last holdout. So typically what I'll do when I'm going through my images is I use color tagging.
Right. So
I'll press 7, and basically that's applying a color tag to the image. So as you can see, we've got yellow there, and there's one here. So I'll go through kind of, I use everything full screen.
Yeah, and I think this is the first actually the first webinar where a guest, and actually definitely the first webinar that people would have seen, especially if I was running it, because it's not something I've ever done, but actually since watching you, it's actually a quite nice way to edit. So I guess to explain to people watching, so we are obviously in Capture One, but with the full screen mode activated, then literally it is just that. But as Phil's just done, as you move your mouse around up to the top or over to the left or over to the right, then the panels fly out. So you can easily kind of navigate everything, but it gives you a super clean workspace to work in.
Yeah. I just, when I'm picking the images, all I want to see is the image. So I can just kind of concentrate on that. So I'll be going through, and if I, want to quickly go back to my grid, I just press, I've got my shortcut that I've set up for G.
Hmm.
So what I'll typically do is I'll go through, like, here are some couple of portraits I did of a guy down the road, part of a series. So I'll pick, a couple of these, um, like I kind of like that one, like the eyes, like that. I was playing around with that one earlier actually, so I just reset it. Let's see what else. Yeah, I can get a rough idea. A lot of this stuff as well, I'll shoot more for like historical purposes because, I'm sure this whole area will be a giant condo before we know it.
Of course, yeah.
So at the time when I'm shooting, I'll shoot stuff just because of that. Like I want it for maybe 20 years from now, I'm going to edit it,
Yeah.
or look back on it. So let's see what else I've got. Yeah, I like this guy. I saw this guy roaming around. I asked him if I could take a portrait of him with his hat. So what I'm doing down here is basically I'm just pressing the color coding that I've set up. Which is
And
like
you're using green, aren't you, as your sort of first hit, I guess? Or yellow, aren't you? Sorry.
yellow, basically yellow. So if I go back to my thumbnails, you can see all the ones that I've kind of highlighted here. And this is just for a quick, I'm not going to take you through every single blurry out of focus picture that I've taken. So I have my different shooting dates of stuff, and then I have like a selects folder. And basically the selects is kind of like an ongoing mood board of projects that I'm working on at the moment. This is a bunch of stuff from Atlantic City that I was shooting last week. So some of these have been edited already. A little bit of candid stuff. A mixture of different things. Getting up early in the morning, shooting. But the idea is, this is kind of an ongoing board that I'm editing, and a lot of the time, you don't know what a great picture is straight away. So,
Right.
or something that I thought was interesting now is not necessarily in 2 days' time. It's not that great. So these have been up there for like a week. I'll edit something like this, and then maybe with this one I've done two different looks. Just playing around, and I'll leave these on here until they're ready to edit, or to export. Sorry. Here's one where I was playing around with adding grain to it, to give it a different look.
Hmm.
So you can see there's kind of a lot of similar frames here. So what I'll do, I'm going to go down to the images that we were just looking at. You can see there's quite a ongoing. These are all pictures from the week. So here are the ones we just selected. So typically what I'll do is I'll highlight these ones, and I just want to be able to see the information as well. And it's just so I can kind of fine tune. One of the things I used to have an issue with when I was using other software,
Hmm.
I was always duplicating all the images. So I would export them to another software to edit them in black and white, and every time I was doing that, I was effectively creating another 150 megabyte file, which
Right.
was data storage seems to be the thing these days, and it's I'm already spending $100 a month on 30 terabytes that I'm backing up at the moment
Right.
of images. So having all those duplicates didn't really help your wallet. So what I found was nice is rather than exporting every image, now I go in. These were shot with a black and white camera, so like a monochrome camera. So it's already
Like a M, I assume. A couple of people are asking,
yeah,
what's your weapon of choice for these ones?
These were this was M10 monochrome,
Right.
and the lens I was trying out was a 75mm Noctilux, which is like a 1.25 lens. This was
Right.
shot like 1.3, so hit or miss on the focus. So, I love that you can go into each one like this and kind of see what you can already see what you've got. So I'm going to kind of, right, what I'll do is the ones that are marked yellow, I still want to keep them. It's not like I want to delete all those files.
Right.
So I'll turn that one to a blue. And all it's doing is when I go to my trash, I make sure that I'm only deleting the files that haven't got any kind of color coding on,
Got it.
So
yeah, because that was quite interesting when we chatted on Tuesday, speaking about this culling process that, yellow is your kind of keeper, blue is I'm not necessarily going to edit it, but I don't want to throw it away. And you're actually quite ruthless in fact that you delete all the other stuff, which is pretty brave actually. I haven't got the guts to do that yet.
After I found that I had so many similar images, and another camera I use is like it's a Leica SL, where you get a much higher burst rate.
Yeah.
And you come back and you might have 20 frames of the same picture.
Yeah.
Because say I'm doing a long exposure and I don't have a tripod on me, maybe rather, if I'm shooting at half a second, I'll put it on 10 frames a second, and I know that one's going to be sharp.
Yeah.
So I don't want to keep the other.
Keep the other 9, exactly.
So I delete. Something that I also found really handy is certain presets that I'll use as well. Like there's a few by Maston Labs, which I discovered thanks to your help. But it's I love that you can kind of take them, and if you can see there, like that's a Pan F, Ilford Pan F.
Yep.
You can go in there and basically you've got the old HP5 that I used to use, and then what I'll do is I've adapted them where maybe I don't want the grain.
Right.
So I'll lose the grain, so I can kind of see a look already there, or maybe I'll go for Tri-X and you can kind of see the changes going on in the background, but it just gives me a starting point. I know guys like Salgado they worked exclusively with Tri-X, and then they would try to find software companies that could replicate that Tri-X look.
Right.
So it's a nice way of just quickly going through the images and seeing what's going to work, what kind of look that I want to give them.
And it's interesting that, even though you're on a monochrome camera, that the style is still actually working quite nicely, even on a monochrome image, because you're still getting the grain and the contrast and highlight adjustments and so on. Yeah.
Well, you can give, you can give any one image many different looks,
Mm-hmm.
So let's have a quick look at these. I don't need 2 of them. So I'll just make that one a blue.
I guess that's a good case why you don't keep everything, because you've got, 2 near identical images there. So you take the brave choice and actually delete one of them.
A lot of the time, if it's people images, I'll keep every single one.
Yeah.
Especially like candids on the street, because it might be that you come back to it 10 years later and the fashion that they're wearing is now interesting,
Yeah.
So if the things that I might not keep, maybe, picture of a dog with a mask, okay?
Yeah.
I don't need to have 2 identical images of a dog with a mask.
Got it.
So kind of once I've broken down my images, I'll go back into full screen mode, and I'm going to quickly pull up one of the presets. And usually this might be just to get an idea,
Mm-hmm.
or the other way I'll do it for a lot of my work is I'll just go in and I'll play around with it myself. Depends what kind of look I want to get. A lot of my work I'm trying to replicate the old Tri-X stuff, or I use it as like a starting point. like I can already see, this is kind of too contrasty.
Right.
I've lost the highlights here, the detail. So maybe I'll start at this point. I'm going to go into my settings.
And also just to let the people know watching that the workspace that you've created is kind of customized to your needs. So as well as working full screen, which I think gives you this great overview, the tools that, your go-to tools.
This is great.
Yeah, then you've kind of just pulled out those list of tools that make sense to you, which I think is, is obviously great at streamlining your workflow as well.
Yeah. I'll have like my black and white. I love that you can go in here and basically add or remove any tool that you want. You can keep it super minimal if you want. I don't really tend to use this because most of the images I'm shooting are black and white anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's kind of like client work, then everything's shot in color, and then I have to edit it. So something like this, I can just come back and forth basically, and I have my, I can scroll to the top and I can bring up these tools as well. And I love this, the before and after. Like that was a great addition. You can kind of see how you botched the edit.
Perfected it, yeah.
I used to get super, like when I used to play around with software and like going back 10 years ago, and I discovered the structure tool and the clarity. And I look back at those images now like in horror, because you get so, I don't know, you get so obsessed or tuned into, what you're doing. Like I could take the clarity here, right, and say you notch it up. That's one way to destroy an image in one foul swoop. Mm-hmm. You're using these soft 1.25 lenses, and then you're trying to keep this soft look here.
Yeah.
And then you go and this is what I used to do, was I'd go and add the clarity, and then all of a sudden all that money that you just spent on that beautiful lens has just gone to waste.
Could have saved yourself a few $1,000s, yeah.
Yeah, just save yourself the money. So a lot of the time, if anything now, I try to go softer. So say we take something like this. Probably what I'd start with, just to bring up the shadows a little bit more. Just want to give myself, see a little bit more detail in here. So trying to see what we got. Vignette I've already got added, because what I've done in the presets that I have,
right,
I've adapted them. So like this, I've already got like some kind of vignette, and that's just from something I used to do in the darkroom all the time. You'd always burn in the corners.
Sure, exactly.
Kind of try to draw your eye in. So I have a bunch of shortcuts set up, basically for adding new layers, so that I don't have to keep coming back and going and adding new layers every time.
Got it.
So I've gone into shortcuts, and I've got like an Apple S basically that will create a new layer for me. And then I've got the same.
Sorry, just to interrupt, just to mention that to a couple of people. So typically, as I saw some questions coming in, typically when you want to start working in layers in Capture One, then you have to go to that tool. You hit the plus button, that creates a new layer. Then you can pick your item of choice for creating the mask. But as Phil's working eloquently in full screen, kind of having to go back and forth to sort of find the tool, create the layer, and start working in it. That's like a lot of mouse movement. So you said, Phil, you do Apple S to make a new layer?
Yeah, so if I want, like say if to your point, if I wanted to add a new layer, I would have to go in, swipe over here, down here, and add a new layer.
Got it.
And go back to the image. So instead of those movements, I've just set up a quick command where it's Apple S, and I already know that it's created another layer for me.
Yeah.
So then I'll have, because I want to keep it on rather than going up here again, I'll have another quick command set up for like dodging and burning. So if I just press the Q button, it will bring up my tool for dodging and burning. So what I'll do as another preset, so I don't have to go in and out and set my exposure. Set my plus and minuses button. I'm just going to click on this, and basically by pressing the plus button, you can kind of see how the exposure is changing.
Right.
And if we go over to here, we can see that, all right, we're +2 right now. So if I'm pressing my minus button, it's bringing that exposure back down again.
Got it.
So
Command S to make a layer, B to choose your brush, I assume, or did you change it to something else?
I have it Q at the moment.
Q to pick your brush, the standard is B, and then plus and minus keys just on the fingers to change the exposure. So,
Yeah.
you know, once you've got all that committed to muscle memory, you know, 1 or 2 clicks, then you can start dodging, burning as you see fit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to delete that just because I started on there.
Now we've made 5 billion layers.
Yeah. Right. Let's get rid of a couple of these a minute.
Ruined your workflow. There we go.
Just destroyed it. So we'll go back where it's the highlights, and I'm just darkening it just a little bit. Now, one of the reasons, let's have a look. That's about right. And then you can, if you want to fine tune it, you can kind of go back over to your tools and you can play with the highlights. You know, or like, say you wanted to do the eyes. So I'm going to create, I'm not going to use that same mask, that same layer, sorry, to start doing everything else, because then it's going to affect everything.
Yeah.
So I'll create another layer, which will be for, let's do the nose. So I'm just going to burn that. I'm just going to bring that down a bit smaller. I'm just trying to bring that down just a little bit. Because if I had one layer, then it would be affecting this as well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to create another layer now for the eye. So let's just bring that down. And I just want to bring up the whites just a little bit. It's almost, it's like, and if you remember the old Abaddon sketch when they used the portrait and he breaks it down for the darkroom.
Yeah.
Like a third of a stop here, half stop here. You're trying to do that, but you're going to create like 20 different layers, but it's fine tuning everything really. So maybe, you know, say for example, I want to create a little bit more detail in the beard. This is just for example's sake. You know, maybe I want to bring this up just a little bit more.
So you're just brightening that a tiny bit, yes?
Just a little bit. So it's almost like you're painting with light. You're picking out little bits of the frame that you want to work on, rather than, you know, if I went back to my layers and said, all right, I want to brighten all the highlights. You know, if I do that, it's going to affect the entire image. So I want to do just break it down subtly, and then I'll go to my before and after. I love that you can do this.
Yeah, it's a really nice way to visualize.
Yeah, because, you know, before I could never figure it out, and you know, so I might do an edit like that, and then I have another command where I use C, which will just basically create a variant.
Okay.
So, you know, basically it's copied that last image that I edited.
Okay.
So I'm going to take the before and after, and then maybe I just want to try something extreme. You know, let's bring the levels. Maybe I want to make it darker. You know, I want to do something really, I don't know, something different, or maybe it's bring up the shadows.
And just to be clear, you made a what we call a variant, which is a virtual copy. So you can see, number 1 and number 2. You're not duplicating the raw file, it's just like another sort of reference that the catalogue can pick up, so a virtual copy. So it's a great way to kind of say, I'm done here with this edit, but as Phil said, I want to try something a bit more outrageous. Make a virtual copy, number 2, and then you can experiment more, which is great.
Yeah. So the other nice thing is that, so say I kind of like the overall look of this image. What I haven't figured out yet, and I'll be coming to you for that, is so I'm going to copy all the settings.
Yeah.
But when it's copying all these layers as well. So if I go to the next image, let's say this one.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, when I apply, you're going to see all these weird marks because it's applied all
the layers as well. Yeah.
So I'll quickly, just to make it easy, I'll just go in and delete them all. You can kind of see how, like the eye there. So I'll go in there. I'm just going to delete them all. But all it's done is it's kind of copied the overall settings that I had from the last image.
Mm-hmm.
This one, I believe. And then it's just applied it to this one. It's just saved me a lot of time, trying to go in and edit. And then what I'll do is I'll go back in and I'll burn in and add my layers again. So that's just a really handy way of just doing quick edits. A lot of the time I found with my editing, like I'll try to get it to kind of how I want it to look on the screen, but all of our screens are different. So even if I edit it and make it look a certain way on my screen, it's not going to look the same on your screen.
No.
So if I'm doing a print for a gallery show or something where I want a big print for a client, then I'm going to take this image, I'm going to kind of get it to how I like the look of it. But then I know that I'm going to send that to the lab. It's going to be printed out as a test print. I'm going to have to physically go in there, and then we're going to go over it together, and we're going to say, all right, we're going to do this, this, and this, because it's very hard to get this monitor to their lab.
Yeah, exactly. You can get it close, but if you want to absolutely nail a print, you kind of have to be there with the printer as well to perfect it.
Yeah. So
I'm going to chuck a couple of questions at you because they've been flinging past left, right, and centre. So thanks to my colleagues helping us out on the various different channels. June was asking, I think, how do you create a virtual copy? So we call it a variant. So Phil's got it set up on a shortcut, but I believe it's in the testing my memory because I've got it on a shortcut as well. It's on the image menu. If you don't mind going up to the image menu, Phil, then we can see it. So it's new variant and clone variant. So new variant makes a copy with no adjustments, but what you did, Phil, was a clone, wasn't it? And we can see a shortcut there. So C for clone just gives you a virtual copy. So it's a great way for experimentation. Let's see, there was a lot of questions, so I'm just trying to pick out the most popular ones, but it seems like my colleague on YouTube is doing a great job of answering those as well. As Jackie said, full screen editing looks refreshing, but I need to familiarize myself with the shortcuts. So and I think that's a good lesson. How long did it take you, Phil, to sort of get into this full screen workflow? A while? Yeah.
Yeah, I've always liked full screen workflows, but it's kind of getting your shortcuts and then also remembering them.
Yes.
Doesn't mean I'm going to remember it. So yeah, it took me a while, but I think it was this added with 20, I think, where you could go to the sides. Yeah. It brings all your tools up. I love that, and especially for culling your images, I've just found it's a great way of doing it.
Yeah. Oh, there was a question earlier about culling. So with the color coding, as we said, yellow is kind of your keeper. The way Phil, you got back to that is just something called a smart album or a smart collection, which pretty much says, if the image fits a certain criteria, so in this case you can see Phil's user collection, if the image fits the criteria of the tag being yellow, then please put it here. So the good news is it's dynamic. So if Phil's looking at those shots, like you said at the start of the webinar, actually I don't think this one is a keeper, then if you clear that tag, then it's gone out the collection. So it's a really nice fluid way of kind of managing selects. But,
you can still go back. Like if I go back to my recent imports, I can go back in there and I can see all the images. These are the ones I'm going to keep. So say I'm going to go and delete all my images, right? These are the images that I took that day. I'm going to go up to the top here. I'm going to put my color tag. So basically I'm rearranging them by color tag. So it's got all these images at the top, and then literally if I want to start deleting images, which I'm not going to do now, but I would just highlight and then delete, and they all go to the trash. And I'll leave them kind of in here for a little bit, just in case.
Just in case. Yeah.
But that's kind of, it's just a nice way of knowing, what the keepers are. Like if I can see it even with kind of these images here, you've got 3 that are almost identical. I don't need to keep all 3 of those images, so I'm going to keep just the one. It's just a good way of going through and just knowing that I've only got the certain ones. There's going to be images when I'm going through where probably a lot of this stuff is not going to be there in a few years.
So it's a good historical context as well.
It's images that you just want to keep for 20 years from now. Like I've seen gallery shows where the images were terrible, but it was interesting because they showed what that area used to look like. So if I just go back to my selects.
Question. I'm just trying to find it because this is problem with my goldfish brain. I thought, that's a good question, and then remembered it. Oh, that was it. I think the answer is no. And this would be my downfall for your workflow with the layer shortcut. Because do you rename your layers in your kind of real life workflow, or do you just leave them as a adjustment layer 1, 2, and 3? Because I'd totally forget what each layer was doing.
To be honest, if I go back in, the way I tend to do it, if I need to see, is I'll use the where are we? If I want to see something, I use the M.
Right.
And I can see, and then I could go in and I could rename it, and I could go in there and put in hair, hair mask.
But I guess your way of editing is kind of, you've got that A to B finished process. So, I guess if you need to go back and edit, you can do it. But I know for me, when I end up with a lot of different layers, I totally forget what everything is, is actually doing.
If you're breaking down like that Avedon portrait, there would be 30 layers there.
At least. Exactly.
So, and also, because I'm just putting out, I'm going through so many images. I'm editing, I might keep 100 images from this for a project that I'm working on. So I'm not going to be writing down every single layer for every single image.
Got it.
To be honest.
No. A couple of questions asking why the white background, why not a grey or a black or something like that? Is that related to the print process, so it's more like it would be framed as a final print?
Well, black is nice. Like on my website, I use black. The only problem with black, and if you look at like a lot of gallery websites, they'll use white.
Right.
So say if we pulled up this image and we had a black background, we wouldn't know where it ends.
That's true. Yeah.
So, you could have an off gray or something, but I just use white just so that I can see it. But I might put it on my website on a black background. But it's just for editing really that I prefer the white.
Got it.
Like we've spoken before about doing different things as well, but that's kind of what works for me.
Cool. All right. Let's. Sorry for interrupting you with a barrage of questions. A couple of people were asking, do you shoot in color as well, or are you purely only on black and white? And if you do shoot in color, what's your kind of conversion process from color to black and white?
Let's take one of these maybe. So yeah, I do shoot in color. Depending on what the project is. If it's a lot of the time, if it's just for me, I'll shoot with the Leica monochrome.
Right.
There's nothing else out there really that's in that form that is going to get you the same quality. If like me converting this SR file to a black and white, it's not going to be anywhere near what a monochrome file is going to give me.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I'm kind of, if I walk out and it's a beautiful color shot, then I'm kind of stuck. So I do tend to keep this SL camera in my bag as well.
Okay.
Or if I'm doing a commercial job or I'm doing like a feature, then I'm going to shoot everything color and I will edit it black and white mainly for me, or unless the client wants it in black and white. So this would be an image. I'm just getting the horizon. That's one thing I always used to screw up. Like the C would always be slanted.
Yeah.
That's it.
But is it consistently slanted to the same angle every time?
Consistently drunk slanted every time. So, like if we take this was during a couple of months ago, I guess. So go back into my naval black and white. Or if I want to be quick, say I have 300 images. A lot of the time when I'm shooting on the street, even with the color camera, the electronic viewfinders, I actually have the camera set up to black and white because I just like walking around and enjoying looking at everything in black and white.
Right.
It can actually help you with your composition as well sometimes. So say I take these 3 images that are color, and I'm culling through 400 images, and the idea is I want it to look black and white. I can either quickly go over to one of the presets I have, and maybe I'm going to make them all black and white, or I can go, let's take this one, I guess. So it's a very colorful image.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe let's just kind of just rotate it a little bit. And crop. I know some people hate to crop, but something like this, I kind of want it leveled and the reflection. So maybe I'll do a color edit of this, and then say maybe I'm like, all right, I want to see what it looks like in black and white. So I'm going to create that. I'm going to press that C, so I'm creating a clone.
Your virtual copy, yep. Variant, as we call it.
Yeah, variant. So if I go there, I can see, all right, I've got my color edit, and I got my black and white that I want to make. So another way, if you're not using presets, you can go in here. We've kind of got a rough idea. Now something like this I see is like a very contrasty, intense. So maybe let's play around with the blacks a little bit. Gonna make it very graphic. So look, maybe I'll bring up the contrast a little bit. So, and then let's add a bit of a vignette. So look at that first. So you can already kind of see what we've done. And then what I'll start doing is going in and fixing things, basically. So like these little corners, details, these little things that are the image is here. We're seeing this person in solitude. they're kind of looking at their reflection, right?
And distracting, yeah.
Yeah, all these things are kind of distracting. So I'm going to create my new layers
So
again.
Command S for your new layer, yep.
And I'm going to go in and using the plus and minus key, I am going to start burning in certain areas. So I can darken that down. Maybe I'll come over here because it's going to be black anyway. Just try and darken that down.
And then to summarise because a couple of people missed the first sort of dodge and burn bit. So while Phil's burning, essentially what Phil did, shortcut to create a new layer, which is Command S in Phil's shortcut set, but you can make it whatever you like. Then using the plus and minus key, can then change the exposure. So plus or minus to lighten or darken, so dodging and burning. And then just by brushing over the image, it's then applying that adjustment. So it's super simple, really. I mean, generally you're using exposure to dodge and burn, but there's nothing to stop you in any layer to use, any of the adjustments. So if you want to add more contrast somewhere, you can do it. Bring up the highlights, drop the highlights, you name it, you can do it on the layer.
Like you can change, like even those bits that I burnt in, you could go in and like make them even darker if you wanted. Say I'm going to create a new layer here. Maybe I want to brighten this part of the reflection. So I'm going to brighten that up a little bit there, and then I'm going to start painting, kind of trying to brighten it up to be a little bit more impactful.
Mm-hmm.
And then so I've made my paint kind of brush, and then by just pressing the plus and minus button, obviously you can see that it's completely overdone, but just to give you an idea of, by just pressing that plus and minus, it's just a quick way of seeing what you want, rather than going out of the full screen mode, across here, it's just one less step.
Yeah, I think it's something I'm going to have to try as well. And as you can shortcut everything, if you want to change your brush dynamics, so opacity and hardness and all those kinds of things, that's a right click normally, but there's nothing to stop you putting shortcuts for those things on shortcut keys as well. So you can have a key combination to make the brush bigger, smaller, softer, harder, more opacity, less opacity, and so on and so forth. So
I love it. I have a trackpad, and you basically go on an Apple, you double click, or you just hold both fingers down on the trackpad, and it'll bring up all those settings there for you as well. So you don't even have to come out of here to change things. So I just find it's a great way of just like doing quick edits, and then maybe, all right, so I've done this one, I can kind of see my before and after. I find a lot of the time what I've done before as well is like, because you're so zoned in onto your computer screen, you could just be totally screwing shit up and not even realize that you're doing it. So I have to walk away, go and make a cup of tea, come back again.
Yeah, see it with fresh eyes.
Yeah, fresh eyes. Or like you said earlier, I'll create a I'll go clone variant. So I'm making another copy, and then maybe I'll go and do one where I go, you can go nuts with it. Really, maybe I'm just going to create another layer and use the gradient tool. So maybe I want to darken the foreground a little bit to try to draw the eye in a little bit more into what's going on in the middle. So I'm just darkening that down using the plus and minus key. And I have another quick command, is just S basically, which just takes me back to, where is it? There,
the basic select cursor, yeah.
Yeah, so, all right, so let's try going back to my background, which is, if you start messing around in a layer, it's going to affect the whole layer. So for general things, I go back to my background. And then, let's see, maybe I'm going to go real deep on the blacks, really intense, maybe even a little bit more. So it's almost become a very graphic. And then I can go and look basically between the two different versions that I have.
Hmm.
So, this is a little bit more subtle. Um, if I wanted to make it more of like a street scene, maybe I would create another layer, and brighten up the buildings even, so that you can see that it's like a city street, and it's not just a graphic image.
Hmm.
So if we go back, you can see the difference between the two.
There was a good tip actually from relating to shortcuts. Frank Winkler in the webinar room. He says he uses an Elgato Stream Deck, which I have here, and I'd show you on camera, but the cable's not quite long enough, I don't think, so I can't show it to you. Nope, the cable's too short. That's a pity. But what the Stream Deck is it's basically a keyboard that's designed for live streaming, as we're doing now, to switch between different scenes. So for example, if we wanted to, show my screen, I can go over here, and if we want to go back to Phil's screen, of course, then we can do that, and so on. But it's basically a little keyboard with lit up keys, which you can customize as well. So what I can also do in Capture One is set it up for adding a layer, changing to a brush, picking a cursor key, you name it. I've only got a small one, which is 6 buttons, so it's a bit limited. But Phil, you probably benefit from the larger one. So yeah, Elgato Stream Deck. It's just really a keyboard with lit up buttons, but you can kind of hook it into any application really. So if you're into shortcuts but you can't remember them, which is often the issue with shortcuts, this is a good way to do it because it's a visual kind of experience. Yeah. And
Right.
As you said, Phil, it took you a while to kind of remember them. And if I'm honest, I remember, I don't know, my kind of 5 or 6 standard shortcuts like you have, Phil. Probably if there was more than 10, I might start struggling a little bit. Yeah, but
No, I definitely could use something like that. I try not to do too much, because like I said, you can botch images very easily.
yeah.
So I try not to spend too much time. Maybe I'll come back to an image. Like sometimes even some of just give an example. This is one with grain. This is one without grain. I'll leave them up there for a week, and I'll come back and say, well, actually, maybe I really like this effect of the grain. So for this project, I'm going to give everything a grainy look. But I'm trying, I don't want to spend too much time when I'm doing it, because I don't want it to become like a composite image, especially with street photography. Like you can't go in and start deleting pieces of trash because it doesn't look right.
Yeah.
Or adding stuff. So if anything, I'll try to crop it out if it's something that I don't want in the shot, or in an ideal world you'd want to crop it out when you're shooting it. So that's kind of a quick look at what I do, but a lot of the stuff is very minimal editing. This was kind of, I wanted to give it a more graphic look with the sea. But yeah, it's you can play it. What I love is that you can create the clones and you can play around with it, and then if it doesn't work, you just delete it. Absolutely.
Couple of people asking, do you refer to the histogram so much? I feel that you're kind of, I know you invested in a decent screen, so are you pretty much going by eye, or sort of a combination of the two?
A lot of it's by eye, because like I said, it's most of the real work is going to be spent in the lab. So even if I get it to the best I can, I want it as that print form. So even images that I've had edited, I've still gone into the lab and said, yeah, it needs to be more burnt in here, or bring it up here, even with mine. It's just easier to do it that way, I've found.
Yeah.
So it's, it
And I
depends.
think, with a good screen, it's even if you totally ignore the histogram, it's actually pretty easy. I think once you get tuned into it, you can tell when you've gone too far either way. I think if you're over or under, then I find without even looking at the histogram, I guess I think what I've botched this.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean to say the histogram isn't useful, but it's not the be all and end all, I guess.
Like sometimes people get obsessed with keeping highlights.
Yeah.
They don't want to blow it out. Whereas I'm like, I want to blow it out. I want it to be completely white on the page.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ignore the histogram altogether because I don't care what it looks. It's the overall look of the whole image that I'm going for. So I will just blow stuff out. A lot of my work are like intense blacks. You can probably see that in a lot of the work.
Yeah.
So, obviously you can see when you actually absolutely destroy. But I did, like you said, I invested in a good monitor.
Yeah.
I've had monitors in the past where like you could go as deep burnt in black in the corners as possible, and then you come to see the print and there's all this stuff that you never even realized was there.
Right. So shadow detail is important. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a quick rough guide, and then what I'll do is sometimes I will go back to a particular image, especially if I know it's going to a gallery. Then I'll come in and I'll really start tweaking stuff and spend a lot more time dodging and burning even more. But initially it's just, like I said, because a lot of the time you don't know which is a good image at first. So maybe this series in AC, I'll have 100 images that I'll put on my phone, and sometimes it's nice to be able to look on a phone even and just, you kind of get an instant impact of whether it's a good shot or not. And then also I'll share stuff on Instagram and social media, and it's kind of a nice way of getting feedback of what works and what didn't.
What doesn't. Yeah, exactly.
So I don't want to spend 30 minutes on every image and then find out that they were all crap anyway.
Yeah. And it's it's an obvious thing, but certainly if having that decent calibrated monitor, it just really takes the guesswork out of everything. And yes, I know everyone else's monitor is different to some extent, but if you've hit the mark, then of course that takes out a lot of the issues that Phil said, like editing, getting it printed, and then seeing there was density there that you couldn't see. So it really makes a difference. So I have a decent monitor, as we say, and a cheap one, and really it's whilst they might look kind of almost identical on the midtones, it's, as you say, Phil, it's at the either end of the scale: highlight retention, shadow retention, roll off or pastel tones, although those kind of stuff, that's when you really see a difference.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm going back to a question which was right at the start from Gloria, but I can't find it. Maybe Andre asked it, but it was the question that we said before we started that was probably going to be the one that most people ask, which was about obviously approaching people. How do you get consent without getting attacked or whatever? And secondly, the sort of or usage or release side of it, because there's always a question of if I take this person out on the street or collection of people,
Yep.
what extent can I use it for?
Right. So typically, it depends on the project, what you're using it for. So if you're using it for, say, a book, you're actually protected, whereas you don't need a release to be used in a book.
Right.
Now, if you were to use that same image for selling a product, then you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble if you don't have a release. That's happened to friends of mine before, where they were on the other end, they were the actor. But so I don't like if I'm doing a commercial shoot, the releases have been sent out before we've even gone to the shoot.
Right.
Everything's already squared away. Um, I've been a news photographer for 20 something odd years now, and the way that I look at it is like if you were photographing, I know different countries have different laws,
Mm-hmm.
but you had to get a consent from every single person you took a picture of on the street. Like say I'm doing a editorial piece for a magazine, and that magazine's making money, right? So if I had to go up to every single person on the street and get a consent, there would be no more news.
No, true. We would be
So
newsless. Yep.
yeah, we need. So it just again, it depends on what you're going to use it for. If you know that you're shooting something for commercial product use, then definitely going to need a release.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess country to country, it's going to vary a little bit as well. So it's
Like
always a tricky subject. And how do you go about approaching your subjects as well? That was definitely a popular question.
so every person's different. So
Yeah.
a lot of the people that I talk with on the street, I might not necessarily photograph them the first time that I see them.
Right.
Yeah, I just, you engage in conversation, get chatting with somebody, and then I'll see them around another time and maybe I'll bring something up. Or sometimes I'll be, I stand on the street corner long enough, a lot of the time, people will come up to me and ask me to take their picture.
Really?
So I've been doing like, over the last few months, I've been doing a feature on the homeless during the pandemic.
Right.
And I remember once, like this guy, I've shot him a couple of times where I walked past and, because I've seen him so many times, he said to me, would you take my picture?
Nice.
So it's like I didn't have to do anything. He was a very intimidating guy, and I never wanted to approach him.
Which guy? Which one? The
Sorry, this guy. He would
right.
he's a big guy. You know that you're gonna lose if you get in a fight with this guy.
Definitely. Yeah.
So, it was very intimidating. I was walking past, and he actually said to me, "Oh, would you mind taking my picture?" So I was like, "Cool." So now I see them. They actually, I know. Yeah, I can actually, you can stop and talk.
Yeah.
This guy with the hat. So sometimes what I use is a good way to do it is people, if you pay them a compliment, or you don't go up to them and say, "Hey, I want to do a picture of your face," or a picture of you. Like this guy was in a wheelchair,
Right.
and I'm not going to go up to him and say, "Hey, I want to do a picture of you in your wheelchair."
No.
Okay, it's kind of like so. For me, what I found interesting was that he was wearing this hat. So I didn't even see him at first. All I saw was a guy kind of backing up towards me
Yeah.
with the American hat. So I said to him, "Hey, do you mind if I photograph your hat?"
Right.
And then he's like, "Yeah, of course, man. Great, take a picture." And then, like after 30 minutes of chatting, then they start loosening up. And then, this guy is John from New Jersey. He used to work in a restaurant out there, got laid off. Now he's living on the streets in the city.
Right.
And then you start getting pictures, more candid stuff. Then you can do that. But a lot of the time, it's like if someone says to you, "Why do you want my picture?" It could be just because I love that jacket. It's awesome. Or those are great pair of shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Pay them a compliment, like you have a great look. That tends to work. And then there's people that will walk around who are all dressed up, who are looking for attention anyway.
Right.
You kind of got to gauge every situation differently.
Yeah,
But
that's really good advice. Like no two people are the same. I saw a shot on your Instagram. I think it was today.
okay.
Was it a guy in Paris? I think
Yeah.
really smartly dressed. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that was
I'm sure that's a great compliment. Hey, you look fantastic. Can I take your picture, please?
well, I speak absolutely zero French, so
Right.
it's like I was sat in a cafe, like the background, I was sat in a cafe having a coffee with a friend of mine, and this guy just walks past, like he's from, the early 1900s,
Yeah.
and I just bolt it out the door, grab my camera and I just look at him and go, you know, like that. No French was spoken, and he just gave me a nod. Didn't do anything else. Let me do a portrait, and it's probably one of the best ones I've gotten, to be honest.
Yeah, it was a great shot, absolutely.
Uh,
But yeah, I think a good lesson. Like all the street photographers I've spoken to, and we've had a couple on webinars. My friend Emily Teague, who did some projects in Cuba and India. You know, I said, do you ever just try and sneak a shot? You know, just like a quick kind of shoot from the hip. And that was, I don't know about you, Phil, but that was something she never did, because there was always this fear of getting caught out, and just found that
right.
obviously the response you get is so much better when you go up and chat to them as well.
It's kind of like, you know, there's different approaches. Like street photography has different approaches for different things. So, you know, kind of my work is a little bit of everything. So
Yeah.
I'll do portraits, and then, you know, like a lot of the stuff on like the beach. Obviously, I haven't asked them. It's kind of like
No. That's like a different scenario for sure.
and then, you know, like if I pull up this image, or sorry, where is it? Sorry, I'm just trying to get to it. You've also got to pick your battles as well.
Yeah.
So a lot of you'll see somebody coming down the street, and you think it's a great picture. Like if I pull up like this kid, that's shot from the.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is, because it's not autofocus, everything's manual.
Okay.
So if I see the kid riding down the sidewalk towards me, I'll quickly just point the camera down, pre-focus on a spot on the ground, and I wait for him to ride into that spot. And that's kind of like, maybe I'll shoot from the hip, or sometimes what you do is you kind of play dumb. You take one picture, and then you look down at your camera, and then you pretend like you're taking a picture a different direction.
Yeah.
To do with that at all.
That's interesting you mentioned that technique about focusing on the ground, because when I was much younger and used to shoot motorsport, then that was exactly the tactic. We'd focus on the track, and then hope to God that when the car, bike or whatever came around the corner, nailed that position, then you would get the shot in focus. So I hadn't thought about doing that for street work as well.
It works for there's some people you're going to photograph that you just know that if I try and do a sneaky shot, they're going to lynch me. No, I'm not going to. A lot of the time I might just try and just pretend that I'm shooting different things as well. And if they look at me and say something, I said, no, sorry, I'm just trying to get my camera to work. But a lot of the time, it depends what it is. If it's just a great looking person, if I'm putting a feature together, then I kind of, I'll want these kind of portraits, and then I'll mix it in with a couple of, different landscapes as well. So you want a different look. You don't want everything to be all headshots or. Yeah. All depends what you're doing, really.
But I certainly, feel personally those more intimate shots, like the portraits, you couldn't get that look and reaction if you just tried to sneak it up on them. Like with that Leica lens, how close are you to them? Like the guy wearing the hat and the awesome fella below as well. Like, are you conversational distance as well?
6 feet.
Yeah, so they kind of know they're having that picture taken. Yeah.
Yeah, and another thing you can do though is, like, say you're say you've asked someone that you want to take their picture. Mm-hmm. You do a couple of portraits and then just get chatting with them.
Right.
Hold your camera down. And like the nice thing with some of these mirrorless cameras, because you can do silent shutter, you just chat away with them and you're just shooting as you're chatting.
Yeah.
That's when you'll get like nice candid moments, but you've already built up a relationship that they're aware that you're there taking pictures.
Yeah, one of my colleagues, Jan, with the Sony A9, I think he's shooting with, he was definitely a proponent of the silent shutter, because you just wouldn't know he was taking a shot. Like, you taking a picture right now? So yeah, it's very sneaky. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love it. Obviously there are certain cameras that I just love, and certain lenses that I love. Mm-hmm. it depends what you're going out with. Like, this picture of the Statue of Liberty, if I pull that up, um, that's with like I think it's 200 mil inside the ferry,
Right.
and there's no, I have, there's not many lenses that I could afford to buy. Well, I don't think Leica even makes certain M lenses, but they make a 90 to 280 for the SL lenses
Mm-hmm.
that I can do this with. So different shots, different equipment. So yeah, it's kind of a good look at kind of how I tackle it.
All right. Well, we are actually overrun. I thought we were underrun, but we are actually overrun by a few minutes. So I'm going to pick a couple of final questions, and then I'll just summarize some of the technical stuff. Your favorite lens for street photography, or lenses, shall we say?
The 30, if I was just like a standard length for any lens manufacturer, I'd say 35 mil.
35 mil. Okay.
Yeah, a 1.4 if you can, just because you can do portraits with it, and
Mm-hmm.
you can get that depth of field. You can also shoot landscapes with it, so it's like a good one lens to have. If I could buy it and afford it, I would buy this Noctilux, but
Right.
I'd sell my car to get it.
Is that that's the was it 0.75? Is it aperture?
It's a 75 1.25 lens.
75 125. Right.
Just yeah,
Which is
if,
what, a good $10,000 or something, isn't it?
I think it's 14,000.
Oh, jeez.
So, yeah, I'll be borrowing that for a while. And believe it or not, I like shooting with longer lenses, especially in the city. Like I was saying, that Statue of Liberty shot,
Mm-hmm.
that's with a 90 to 280. You can get a lot of really nice images with like a longer lenses. But yeah, if I'm going out just for myself, I'll probably have a 35 mil and a 75 mil.
Yeah, right. That's one of my
Yeah.
two favorites as well.
Like prime lenses though, if you can.
Yeah. I know zoom lenses are great, but for whatever reason, I'm absolutely hopeless using a zoom lens. I just cannot use them. A couple of people asking about printing. So when you print, are you just outputting to TIFF big as possible, or are you sizing for your print output, or is that a conversation you have with the printer?
When I'm exporting them, I learned this lesson years ago. I make them as big as I possibly can. So I'll make them TIFF 16-bit and as big as I possibly can. So typically, most of the ones I'm doing are, say, 160 megabytes.
Right.
And then if we need to make it a bigger print in the lab, then I'll let them do that, because
Okay.
probably they have the software to take care of it and know what they're doing.
Yep.
I know my limitations on what I can do and what I can't do, and I was a good black and white printer in the darkroom, but I wouldn't dare try to do some of the stuff they do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, as big as possible. And then what I'll do, every time I export, I'll do like a low resolution for kind of social media and website, and then I'll create a big TIFF file for the prints, or just if it's like, if I don't want to make them JPEG and then 10 years later someone says, oh, do you have that image in we'd want to do a great print of that, and then I've got to go back, try and find the raw file, and then make a big print from that. So I'd rather do it now and pay for the storage than come back.
Yeah, you have your master giant export, I get, for repurposing. Yeah, and I guess the key is finding a good printer to work with as well. So
you want, depending on the print as well, like if you're doing like silver gelatin prints for archival, then a lot of the time printers will give you a test print,
right,
so that you can kind of say, well, yeah, I want to make this a little bit darker, I want to do this, and then they'll print it.
Yeah. And I'd say if you don't have like a good conversation with a printer, then a good tip from me is to try and deliver the print in a way that they kind of can't mess it up. So if you're exporting to, let's pick a size 20 by 16 inches, export from Capture One at 20 by 16, so they then don't resize it. But if you have a good relationship like Phil does, then it makes perfect sense to give them as much data as possible, and then they can obviously, with their skill set, manipulate it as best as possible. But yeah, if you don't have that relationship, give them the least amount of screw ups to make.
Yeah. I've also found with the cropping as well, like you've got to be careful with your crops, because a lot of the time if you're doing a gallery show with certain places, the last thing you want to be doing is having to frame all your own work, because it's going to cost you an absolute fortune.
Yes.
So a lot of galleries will actually have like pre-made, they have frames that they use for different shows all year.
Yep.
So they'll tell you that we need these prints, you know, this size, or 20 by 24, or so if you start doing like obscure crops,
Yep.
and it's not going to fit for their frames, then you're having to pay to get frames made.
Yeah, which is much more expensive.
Yeah, exactly. It's probably 2-3 times the cost of the print at least. So
yeah. And last question from Ruggiero says, are you worried at walking around the city with expensive gear? Sort of any tips to mitigate that?
Yeah, a great tip. I hired this guy to walk behind me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. He's an awesome looking bodyguard. Yeah.
He walks around with me. I would say use bags that don't look like camera bags.
Right. Yep.
Keep your camera away, hidden away most of the time. And I I used to do celebrity work, and it was the camera never came out of the bag until the picture was imminent.
Right.
So same kind of thing. If you're walking around with like 2 expensive Nikons with big zoom lenses over your shoulder, someone's probably going to be following you around.
Yeah. That's really a good tip. Having a big fancy looking camera bag and 2 long lenses hanging off 2 bodies is kind of a good advert, really.
Exactly.
Last wrap up sort of technical side of things. A couple of people asking about the views that you're using. So just to summarize, if you want to see the background in white, you can just right click anywhere in Capture One's viewer and pick a different color: grey, dark grey, white, and so on. The view that Phil's got at the moment is just basically the browser. So in Capture One you have, your 3 elements. You have the browser, the viewer, and the tools, and all of those can be independently hidden or shown, at their will. So in the view menu, so could you go up to, there you go, thanks Phil. So if you go up to the view menu as well, up top, and then in the view menu, basically it kind of shows, so we've got viewer is checked on, so we can see the viewer. Tools is not checked on because we can't see it, but kind of any of those elements you can hide and show. So it was, I can't remember who was asking, sorry I forgot your name, David in the webinar room was asking. So really, if you just want to see thumbnails, you hide the tools and you hide the browser and the viewer, and all of that is shortcut keys. So I just tap a key on my keyboard to hide the viewer, and then I've got that full screen browser mode. So just have a look in that view menu, and then you can really see how you can customize everything. And it's been eye-opening for me, because it's actually a really nice way to work without kind of seeing all this stuff all over the place. So there we go. Oh, Phil, I'm just going to bring up just you and me on screen so they can see your Instagram tag. So if you want to follow Phil, then look below Phil and you can see his...
follow me with my camera.
Yeah. So at Philip Penman, but on your Instagram, if I remember, there's links to your website and other pages and so on, correct? Yeah. Excellent.
It's philpenman.com.
philpenman.com, easy to remember. And we were recording this, so if you want to watch it all over again, then it'll basically be on YouTube now, because we streamed it live to YouTube. So if you want to rewind and watch us yabbering on from the start, you can do so. So, all right, Phil, thanks again for joining us. It's been a pleasure. And really appreciate you spending the time with us to show us everything. And I hope everybody pops in to your website and Instagram and checks it out.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Phil. Take care. Bye now. Bye, everyone.
Bye.